Mom sent me a bill for my childhood and demanded $237,000, so here's what I did. I've always believed that when you work hard, stay responsible, and avoid unnecessary drama, life will reward you for it. Turns out that's not how things work, at least not in my family. In my family, the harder you work, the more people expect from you. And when did I stop giving? That's when the real chaos started. I'm 36F, and I always thought I had a pretty normal relationship with my family. We weren't the kind to be overly affectionate, but we got along well enough. At least, that's what I believed, until recently. Until I realized that to some people, family just means unlimited access to your wallet. My brother, Percy, 34M, and I grew up pretty independent. We had to be. My younger sister, Molly, 28F, didn't have that same struggle. She was our mom's absolute favorite, and while favoritism exists in a lot of families, my mom took it to a level that still blows my mind. Molly never had rules. She never had consequences. She was given everything, protected from everything, and any time she made a mistake, someone else took the blame. Meanwhile, Percy and I, we were expected to be self-sufficient. If we needed anything, we had to figure it out on our own. My dad was the only one who ever tried to keep things fair, but when he passed away 8 years ago, all that balance disappeared. After that, my mom didn't even bother pretending anymore. Molly got everything, and Percy and I were just supposed to understand. So we did. We moved out as soon as we could, stayed polite but distant, and kept our own lives separate. And honestly, it worked. Until Percy got hurt. It was the kind of thing that could happen to anyone. One wrong step, one unlucky landing, and suddenly he had a fractured ankle that required surgery. It wasn't the worst injury in the world, but it was serious enough to throw his life off course. He needed surgery, physical therapy, and months of recovery. The problem? He was in between jobs and working on launching his own media business. His savings were meant for getting his company off the ground, not for dealing with an accident that left him unable to walk properly for months. I didn't even hesitate. I covered every single expense. The hospital bills, the at-home nurse, the physical therapy. He didn't ask. I offered because he's my brother, and I had the means to help. It felt good to help someone who actually needed it. Then Molly found out. And suddenly, I wasn't just a caring sister. I was an opportunity. Molly and I weren't close. That's why when she called me out of the blue, I already knew she wanted something. I answered, half expecting her to ask for a favor in her usual way, where she talks like we're best friends for 5 minutes before casually slipping in a request for money. She didn't even bother with the act this time. Instead, she started talking about an apartment. Not just any apartment, a penthouse and a luxury high-rise. She listed the features like she was selling it to me. A rooftop pool, a spa, a private gym. I waited for her to get to the point. Then she did. She wanted me to pay for half of it. Not as a loan, not as a temporary favor. She expected me to cover half of the rent indefinitely. Her reason? Since I had paid for Percy's medical bills, it was only fair. I thought she was joking. She wasn't. She genuinely believed that helping Percy after an injury was the same as funding her luxury lifestyle. I told her no immediately. Not just no, not. And that's when she lost it. She started shouting, saying I was being unfair and that I was playing favorites. If you cared about family, you'd help me too. That's what she screamed before hanging up on me. She didn't take it well. Because less than an hour later, my mom called. The second I picked up, my mom was already yelling. She was furious. She demanded to know why I was being so cruel to Molly, why I was abandoning her when she was finally trying to be independent. I asked her how having me pay half of her rent indefinitely made Molly independent. She ignored that. She just needs some help getting started. You helped Percy. Why can't you help her? I explained, very clearly, that Percy broke his ankle. Molly just didn't want to get a job. That's when my mom said something that almost made me laugh. If you refuse to help, then we have no choice but to cut you off. I paused for a second, actually processing that. Then I responded, calmly, we barely talk anyway. If that's what you want, go ahead. And I hung up. I blocked them both. I thought that was the end of it. But the next morning, my fiancé, Jackson, got a message from my mom. Since I cut her off, she decided to go through him instead. The message was long and dramatic, the usual script. She and Molly were heartbroken. They had decided to cut me off permanently. She hoped I was happy that I had destroyed our family over money. Because, somehow, I was the villain. I expected to feel angry. But instead, I just felt relieved. I woke up the next morning expecting silence. No messages. No missed calls. Nothing. I had officially been cut off from my family, and honestly, that should have been the end of it. I should have been relieved. Free. Done. But people like my mother and Molly don't just let things go. When they lose control over someone, their first instinct isn't to accept it, it's to find another way in. And when they realized I wasn't coming back on my own, they decided to force their way back in. It started with the relatives. One by one, my aunts, uncles, and cousins started reaching out, some calling, some texting, all saying the same thing in slightly different ways. I don't know the full story, but your mom and sister are hurt. Maybe you should just talk to them. I get that Molly can be difficult, but she's still family. Cutting her off completely seems extreme. Your mom is devastated. She didn't even leave her room all day yesterday. Is that really what you wanted? I ignored them all, because I did know the full story, and I wasn't going to be guilt-tripped into fixing a mess that I didn't create. That didn't stop them from trying. And when they realized the emotional angle wasn't working, they switched to attacking me instead. The messages changed. Suddenly, I wasn't just stubborn, I was ungrateful. You wouldn't even be successful if your mom hadn't raised you right. She sacrificed so much for you, and this is how you repay her? You act like you're so much better than everyone just because you have money. That one made me laugh. Better than them? No. I just wasn't willing to be used anymore. But apparently, that was enough to make me the villain of the family. The worst part? Most of these people had barely spoken to me in years. They weren't reaching out because they cared about fixing the relationship. They weren't neutral parties trying to help. They were just parroting whatever my mother told them. I stopped reading the messages. But then, a few days later, something happened that I couldn't ignore. I was at work when I got an email notification. At first, I assumed it was just another routine message until I saw who it was from. My boss. And the subject line? Urgent. Discussion needed. My stomach dropped. I clicked the email and immediately felt my blood run cold. Because attached to the message was an email my mother had sent to my company. She had tried to contact my employer. It was long, dramatic, and full of outright lies. She claimed that I had been stealing from the family and that I was mentally unstable and lashing out at loved ones. She hinted that I might be stealing from my job too, that I was reckless with money and should be monitored closely. I felt sick. Not because I thought my boss would believe her, he wouldn't, but because this was proof that my mother wasn't just upset. She was actively trying to ruin my life. I went straight to my boss's office. I don't know what I expected, maybe suspicion? Concern? But the second I stepped in, he just sighed and shook his head. She's trying to manipulate you, isn't she? He said. I exhaled, relieved. Yeah. He slid the email across the desk. This is garbage, he said. I wouldn't have even brought it up, but I wanted you to know in case she tries anything else. I nodded. She will. He sighed. Figured as much. If she contacts anyone else here, let me know. We'll shut it down immediately. I left his office feeling grateful, but also furious. Because it wasn't enough for my mother to be upset. She wanted revenge. And what if she couldn't manipulate me into giving her what she wanted? She'd try to destroy me instead. I blocked her email. I blocked every flying monkey that kept reaching out to guilt-trip me. And for a few days, things were quiet. But then, just as I started thinking maybe she'd given up, my grandparents called me. And what did they tell me? Made me realize this was far from over. I knew something was wrong the second I answered the phone. My grandparents don't call me often. It's not that we aren't close, we are. But they're the kind of people who prefer letters over emails, in-person visits over phone calls. So when my grandpa's number flashed on my screen, I knew this wasn't just a casual chat. And I was right. The first thing he said? We need to talk about your mother. Apparently, after failing to get a reaction out of me, my mother decided to switch tactics. Since I had blocked her, she went to my grandparents with a brand new version of the story. And in this version, I wasn't just being selfish, I was being cruel. She told them that I had abandoned her and Molly with no warning. That I had cut all ties out of nowhere just because she had asked me to help Molly get on her feet. She left out the part where Molly expected me to fund her luxury lifestyle indefinitely. She left out the part where she threatened to cut me off first. She left out the part where she tried to get me fired. Instead, she painted herself as a heartbroken mother, and of course, she made sure to add one last detail. She won't even talk to me. I don't know what I did wrong. And my grandparents, bless them, fell for it. My grandpa sighed on the phone. Look, sweetheart, we're not taking sides. We just think maybe there's been some misunderstanding. I closed my eyes. Of course. She's your mother, he continued, his voice gentle. And she loves you. Maybe you should just talk to her. I felt my grip tighten around the phone. I love my grandparents. They're good people. Too good. The kind of people who believe that, deep down, everyone has good intentions. The kind of people who want to believe that family can always be fixed. But I knew better. My mother didn't love me, at least, not in the way a parent is supposed to love their child. She loved control. She loved power. And when I stopped giving her both, she decided to burn everything down instead. I took a deep breath. Grandpa, I need you to listen to me. I am listening, he said softly. Then you need to understand something, I said. This isn't a misunderstanding. She knows exactly what she's doing. She's trying to make me feel guilty, so I'll let her back in. Silence. Then, my grandma's voice, hesitant but firm. So, you're saying she lied? I swallowed. I'm saying she's leaving out a lot of details. I spent the next half hour telling them everything. The penthouse demand. The yelling, the threats, the attempted character assassination at my job. Everything. They didn't say much while I spoke. Just listened. By the time I finished, my grandpa let out a long, tired sigh. Well, that's not what she told us at all. Of course, it wasn't. I just don't understand, my grandma murmured. Why would she do this? I almost laughed. Why? Because she had spent her entire life getting what she wanted. Because, for decades, people had bent over backward to make sure she was comfortable. When did I stop doing that? She panicked. And panicked people lash out. I thought that was the end of it. I really did. I figured that after my grandparents confronted her, she'd either double down on her lies or finally back off. And for a few days, it seemed like she had backed off. But then, something even worse happened. It started with a knock at my door. At first, I thought it was a delivery. But when I opened the door, I froze. Because standing there, looking smug as ever, was Molly. I hadn't seen her in person in almost a year. And judging by the look on her face, she thought this was going to be a power move. I didn't say anything at first. Just stared. Finally, she broke the silence. Aren't you going to invite me in? I almost laughed. Instead, I stepped outside and shut the door behind me. What do you want, Molly? She pouted. Is that any way to talk to your sister? I don't have time for this, I said flatly. Get to the point. She sighed dramatically. Mom told me to come talk to you. You know, to work things out. I raised an eyebrow. So let me get this straight. She's too ashamed to talk to me herself, but she's fine sending you to try and manipulate me? Molly's smug expression flickered for a second. Then she scoffed. God, you're so dramatic. It's not manipulation, it's called family. You wouldn't get it. I let out a slow breath. Molly, what do you want? She rolled her eyes. I'm giving you a chance to fix things. Apologize to Mom. Let us move past all this. If you do, she said she'll forgive you. I actually laughed out loud. Forgive me? I repeated. She nodded, completely serious. She's willing to move past this whole thing if you just admit you were wrong. I took a step back. Well, you know, for a second, I thought you were going to say something useful. Molly folded her arms. I'm serious. So am I said. We have nothing to fix. You and Mom threw a tantrum because I wouldn't fund your lifestyle. That's not a family issue. That's your problem. Her face twisted with anger. You know what? Fine, she snapped. I tried. When Mom tells the whole family what a selfish piece of garbage you are, don't come crying to me. She turned on her heel, storming off like a child who had just been told no for the first time. And as I watched her go, I felt something I hadn't expected. A week passed. No messages. No unexpected calls. For the first time in a while, I thought maybe, just maybe, they had finally let it go. Then a letter arrived. Not a bill, not a flyer, an envelope with my mother's handwriting on it. I nearly tossed it straight into the trash, but curiosity won. I opened it, half expecting some dramatic apology or an attempt to guilt me back into the fold. Instead, I found an invoice. A detailed, itemized list of every major expense she had ever paid for me growing up. Housing, food, clothes, school supplies with interest added. And at the bottom, a total balance of $237,000. I actually laughed. She was billing me for my childhood. Attached was a note in her signature, perfectly neat handwriting. Since you've decided to stop contributing to this family, it's only fair that you pay back everything we've spent on you. Once this debt is settled, we can move forward. Debt? She genuinely believed raising her child was a loan, one I now had to repay because I was no longer financially useful to her. It was so delusional that I almost thought it was a joke. It wasn't. I took a picture, saved it for reference, and shredded the original. Then, I sat down and wrote exactly one response. Mom, I got your letter. If this is a joke, it's not funny. If you're serious, I don't know what to tell you. Either way, don't contact me again. I hit send. Minutes later, my phone buzzed. Not from her. From Molly. The email was a rant. Long, furious. Packed with accusations about how I was ungrateful, how I wouldn't be where I was if it weren't for my mother's sacrifices, and how I had no right to act like I did everything on my own. Then she ended it with something that almost made me laugh. You're just mad that Mom is finally holding you accountable. If you had any decency, you'd pay what you owe and stop being so selfish." I didn't respond. I didn't even finish reading the whole thing. I just deleted it. If they thought they could bully me into paying for the past, they were in for a rude awakening. But I wasn't prepared for what happened next. When emotional manipulation failed, my mother decided to get legal. A few days later, I was served with lawsuit papers. At first, I thought it was some kind of mistake. Then, I saw my mother's name listed as the plaintiff. She was suing me for unpaid family debts. I sat there, staring at the papers, feeling a kind of exhaustion I had never felt before. This wasn't just another attempt to guilt me. She was trying to force me to pay her. She wasn't angry anymore, she was desperate. I needed a lawyer. Fast. The next day, I sat across from an attorney, trying to explain what was happening without sounding insane. "She's suing you for being her child?" he asked, flipping through the paperwork. I exhaled. Pretty much. He didn't even look surprised. "This won't hold up in court. But if she's willing to go this far, she's not going to stop on her own. You need to shut this down completely." I leaned forward. "What do I do?" He set the papers down. "You countersue." I wasn't the type to seek revenge. But this wasn't about revenge. This was about making sure she never pulled something like this again. My lawyer filed a counter lawsuit for harassment, emotional distress, and legal fees. The moment my mother got served, she sent me an email. Subject line: "Are you doing this?" I didn't even open it. I had done enough explaining. 2 weeks later, my lawyer called with news. She dropped the case. Relief washed over me. "She thought she could scare you into settling," he continued. "When she realized she'd lose money instead, she backed off." I nodded. "And Molly? She wasn't listed in the lawsuit, so legally, she's not involved. But I bet she's just as angry." Probably. But I wasn't worried about Molly anymore. Because this wasn't just the end of the lawsuit. It was the end of all of it. They had no more control over me. And for the first time in my life, I was completely free. I expected silence after the lawsuit ended. She had lost. She had embarrassed herself. Any reasonable person would have taken that as a sign to stop. But my mother was not a reasonable person. If she couldn't legally force me to hand over money, she was going to make sure everyone around me hated me for refusing. It started with social media. I don't use it much, but I had family members calling me, asking if I'd seen what was being posted. When I finally checked, I saw exactly what they were talking about. My mother had written a long, public post about how I had betrayed my family. It was dramatic. She talked about how she had given up everything to raise me, how she had sacrificed so much, and how I had abandoned her in her time of need. She never mentioned that the sacrifice she made was being a parent, something that was her responsibility. She conveniently left out the fact that she had tried to sue me for money. The comments were full of support for her. "I can't believe a daughter would do this to her mother. How selfish do you have to be to turn your back on family? She raised you, and you repay her like this?" It was clear that no one knew the real story. And that's exactly how she wanted it. I could have responded. I could have posted my side, uploaded screenshots, exposed every lie. But I didn't. Because at the end of the day, I didn't care what strangers on the internet thought of me. I cared about real-life consequences. And those came a few days later when I got a call from my uncle. He didn't waste time. "You need to fix this," he said, his voice sharp. I exhaled, already tired. "Fix what?" He scoffed. "Mom's a mess. She's been crying nonstop, telling the whole family that you're punishing her for no reason. You really won't even talk to her." I pinched the bridge of my nose. "Have you even asked me what happened?" Silence. Then, a sigh. "Look, I don't know every detail, but at the end of the day, she's still your mother. You only get one." I had heard that line 1,000 times before. I was done hearing it. "She tried to sue me for money," I said flatly. That shut him up. When he finally spoke again, his tone had changed. "What?" "She took me to court," I said. "She lost. And now she's trying to turn everyone against me instead." More silence. Then, quietly, she didn't mention that part. Of course, she didn't. Because that part didn't make her look like the victim. I thought maybe, just maybe, that would be the final straw. That once my uncle knew the truth, he'd stop defending her. I was wrong. Because the next words out of his mouth? "Well, she wouldn't have done that if you had just helped a little." I actually laughed. "I helped Percy because he had a medical emergency," I said. "Molly wanted me to fund a penthouse. You think those are the same?" He hesitated. "She's your sister. She just wanted support." I shook my head, even though he couldn't see me. "No. She wanted money." And when I said no, they both lost their minds. There was another long pause. Then, a sigh. "Look, I don't want to be in the middle of this." "Then stop calling me." But I didn't say that. Instead, I said, "Then don't be." And I hung up. The next few weeks were strangely quiet. The social media post lost traction. The flying monkey stopped calling. For the first time in months, I felt at peace. Then, just as I let my guard down, something happened that I never expected. My mother showed up at my door. In person. Standing there like she hadn't spent months trying to ruin my life. I opened the door but didn't say a word. She smiled like this was just a normal visit. "Hi, sweetheart." I stared. "Why are you here?" She sighed, her expression turning sad. "I just want to talk. Face to face. No yelling, no lawyers." She sounded so reasonable. For a second, I almost believed she meant it. But I had learned my lesson. So I crossed my arms and said, "Whatever you have to say, you can say it right here." She blinked, clearly not expecting that. "Can I at least come inside?" "No." Her mouth pressed into a thin line. Then, in a tone that almost sounded rehearsed, she said, "I just want my family back." I waited for the real reason she was here. Because my mother never did anything without an agenda. Sure enough, after a few beats of silence, she said, "I think we've all made mistakes. And I know I got a little emotional, but at the end of the day, we need to support each other." There it was. I kept my voice calm. "You tried to take me to court." Her expression didn't even change. "I was hurt. You contacted my boss and tried to get me fired. That was a misunderstanding." I let out a humorless laugh. "Right. A misunderstanding." She exhaled, rubbing her temples like she was the one suffering. "Listen, I didn't come here to fight." "Then why are you here?" She hesitated, then said, "Molly needs help." Of course. I just stared at her, half waiting for her to realize how ridiculous this was. She didn't. Instead, she sighed. "She's struggling. And I know you're mad at me, but don't punish her for it." I almost laughed. "Punish her?" She wanted me to pay for her penthouse. "She's still your sister," my mother snapped. "She's young. She's just trying to find her way." "She's 28, I said dryly. My mother waved a hand. "That's not the point." "Then what is the point?" Her expression softened, her voice turning pleading. "We can start fresh. If you just—" I cut her off. "No." She blinked. "What?" "No," I repeated. "There's no starting fresh. There's just me, moving on. Without you." Her face twisted. "You can't just cut us out." "I can," I said simply. "And I am." She stared at me, waiting for me to cave. But I wasn't that person anymore. I wasn't backing down. And when did she finally realize that? She did something I never thought I'd see. She gave up. Her posture straightened, and her voice turned cold. "Fine," she said. "If that's how you want it, don't bother coming back when you regret it." She turned and walked away. I didn't stop her. And I never regretted it for a second. The door shut behind her, and for the first time in my life, I felt nothing. No guilt. No second-guessing. Just relief. She had walked away, expecting me to chase after her. I didn't. I had meant what I said. This was the end. But, of course, she wasn't done. Because people like my mother don't just accept defeat. They wait. They plot. And when they see an opportunity to pull you back in, they take it. It started with small things. A family friend texted me, saying my mother had mentioned I was going through a difficult phase and would come around soon. A cousin called, saying my mom had so much love for me and just wanted to fix things before it was too late. It was all manipulation. She was waiting for me to feel guilty enough to come back on my own. And when I didn't, she switched strategies. A few weeks passed, and then I got an email from a real estate agency. I almost ignored it, assuming it was spam, but something about it felt off. So I opened it. My jaw dropped. It was a rental application, with my name on it, for a penthouse. The exact one Molly had wanted. I scrolled through the details, my heart pounding. My name, my email, even my work information had been added. The only thing missing? My signature. I called the agency immediately. The woman on the phone sounded cheerful. "Oh, are you calling to finalize the lease?" I took a deep breath. I never applied for this. There was a pause. Then, slowly, "Are you sure? The co-applicant said you were handling everything." Co-applicant. I already knew before I asked. But I asked anyway. "Who's the co-applicant?" A keyboard clicked on the other end. Then, "Molly, last name." I closed my eyes. Of course. Of course. I explained everything to the agent, forwarded proof that I had never applied, and had them flag it for fraud. Then, I sent one single text to my mother. "Tell Molly if she ever tries to steal my identity again, I will press charges." I didn't wait for a response. I just blocked her. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. Because a few days later, I got a call from my bank. They flagged an unusual charge attempt. An attempt to withdraw $10,000 from my account. My stomach dropped. Where was the request made? The rep hesitated. Then she said the name of my mother's bank. She had tried to take money directly from my account. I froze. The penthouse scam was one thing. This was fraud. I didn't think. I didn't hesitate. I just said, I need to file a fraud report. And once I had, I called the only person who could make sure this never happened again. My lawyer. I met with him the next day. He listened as I explained everything, his face unreadable. When I finished, he let out a slow breath. We need to escalate this. I nodded. I know. There are two options, he continued. We press charges, or we file a restraining order. I swallowed hard. A restraining order? He nodded. It's clear she's not going to stop. She's already tried to steal from you twice. If we don't take legal action, she'll keep finding ways to interfere in your life. I exhaled. Do both. His eyebrows raised slightly, but he nodded. All right. Let's get started. Filing a fraud report against my mother felt surreal. It shouldn't have come to this. But she had forced my hand. She had spent months trying to manipulate me, harass me, and steal from me. This wasn't about family anymore. It was about protecting myself. And once I signed the documents, I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't scared of her anymore. I wasn't angry. I was just done. A few days later, my lawyer called with an update. The fraud case is moving forward, he said. And the restraining order was approved. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. It was official. She couldn't contact me anymore. Couldn't show up at my door. Couldn't try to steal from me ever again. She had lost. And this time, there was no coming back from it. The restraining order should have been the end of it. There was nothing left for her to do. No more manipulation, no more threats, no more schemes. Legally, she couldn't contact me anymore. But what about people like my mother? They don't just stop. Even when they've lost, they refuse to accept reality. And what she did next? Proving that she would rather destroy herself than admit defeat. It started with one final attempt. A mutual family friend reached out, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. She didn't try to guilt me, didn't demand I fix things with my mother. Instead, she simply said, "Your mom is selling the house. You should probably check on that." I almost ignored it. Almost. But something told me to look. And when I did, I realized how far my mother had truly fallen. She had listed her home below market value. Way below. She was trying to sell it fast, which meant one thing. She was desperate for money. And that's when it hit me. The fraud attempt. The penthouse scam. The sudden lawsuit. It was never just about me. It was about her financial situation falling apart. She had burned every bridge she had, and now, when she needed someone to bail her out, there was no one left. A few days later, I got a call from Percy. For the first time in months, his voice wasn't neutral. It wasn't cautious. It was furious. "She stole from me," he said. "She stole from me." I gripped my phone. "What happened?" "I just checked my savings account," he said. "She had access from years ago when I was younger. I never thought to change it." My stomach twisted. "How much?" "A lot." Silence stretched between us. Then he exhaled, voice tight. "I'm pressing charges." I closed my eyes. I already did. The legal process was slow. But over the next few months, things unraveled fast. More and more people started realizing they had been used. Distant relatives. Old friends. Even Molly, who had been shielded from reality her whole life, suddenly found herself on her own. Because without our mother covering for her, she had no idea how to survive. And she hated me for it. She sent one final message before I blocked her completely. "Are you happy now? You ruined everything." I didn't respond. Because for the first time in my life, I was happy. The fraud case moved forward. My mother tried to plead innocence, claiming it was all a misunderstanding. The judge didn't buy it. She was sentenced to probation and mandatory financial counseling. She lost the house. She lost control over everyone she had manipulated. And she lost me. For good. I wish I could say I felt something when it was all over. But the truth? I didn't. No relief, no anger, no sadness. Just peace. Because for the first time, I wasn't waiting for the next betrayal.